What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show on Tuesday, July 1st. Yes, we are into the month of training camp. Just about 3 weeks, training camps are opening up. Pretty unbelievable. Here we are. We're in July, and Draftathon begins today. This is our 2-month march toward hopefully more than $100,000 that we are going to raise for St. Jude Children's Hospital. It's going to be an amazing 2 months with all of your help. Tell you about that in a little bit. Now, look, we are dug in on some guys, right? We're going to be drafting a lot of guys in our leagues, guys that we love. And then there are going to be some guys that we don't really like that we're going to be avoiding. But there are some players that, we're worried that we're wrong about them. Because if we're wrong about them, it's going to be pretty bad for our fantasy teams. So we'll talk about some of those players today. Happy Draftathon, fellas. You guys ready to raise some money?
Yes.
Yeah. This is the best thing we do, right? I mean,
100%.
It's amazing. Heath, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be doing a live draft next month to raise money?
August 22nd, I'll be back in Memphis for the second annual FFT St. Jude's Creators Draft. Will be a wild time. I will be asked to do all types of embarrassing things, I'm certain. And we're going to raise a bunch of money for the kids.
And wait until you hear what we have planned for the FFT Open this year. Now, as I said, we will get to that in a little bit. But I want to talk about Jaylen Waddle. So that's a really interesting player to me right now. First, let's get one player that you're worried about being wrong about. Heath. Sorry.
Yeah, I will say the player, it's probably the guy that I am most outlandishly ranked. And that would be Jeudy. Because I do still think that Jerry Jeudy's a good NFL wide receiver, and I think that Joe Flacco's great for NFL wide receivers, but there's so many moving pieces there in Cleveland. There's a lot of ways things could go wrong, and Jeudy has a track record of giving us a couple of spectacular games and then a whole lot of not so inspiring stuff. So I think I'm not backing down from the assertion that if Jerry Jeudy and Joe Flacco play together for 17 games, Jeudy could be a top 12 wide receiver. But I don't know how many games we're going to get with Flacco.
And where do you have Jeudy ranked?
I think he's 16th right now at wide receiver for me.
He's 26th for Jamie, 24th for Dave. And right now I see you have 17th. Sorry, I just looked up the ranking. 17th in between Davante Adams and DJ Moore. Okay, Dave, give me one player you're worried about being wrong about.
Really, since the NFL draft, I've had the heebie-jeebies about Brian Thomas Jr. Let me put it to you guys this way. If he had averaged 13.3 PPR points per game and the Jaguars drafted Travis Hunter, they moved up in the draft to get Travis Hunter, no one in their right mind would think that Brian Thomas Jr. could be in line for 15, 16 PPR points per game. No one would think that. But because he finished the way he finished last year, he went bonkers as the only reliable target in Jacksonville. Most of it, if not all of it, with Mac Jones at quarterback. We're all kind of reacting to that a lot. And I feel like I can't disagree that Brian Thomas Jr. is a bad talent. The dude's awesome. He's fast. He's tall. Made all kinds of plays before and after the catch last year. We talked about this last week. But the addition of Travis Hunter is going to suck targets away from him. And unless there is a massive funnel to just those two guys, I'm nervous that he's going to have to be a number one fantasy receiver on like 7.5 targets per game. And so I've got him ranked like he's going to get 8.5 or 9 targets per game, and he's going to be just fine and getting around 17 PPR points per game. I'm worried I'm too high, and that with no guarantees that Trevor Lawrence is going to be great, and with Travis Hunter there, and there's a pretty reliable chance here. I don't know if reliable is the right word, but a pretty good chance that Travis Hunter is going to be a good wide receiver. I wonder if I'm overrating him, and maybe if we're all overrating him because of the weird circumstances he found himself in and benefited from last year.
I think the unique thing about Thomas in this conversation, and I'm just guessing, my guy Jeudy is my guy. I have him ranked a lot higher than consensus or Dave and Jamie, and so I'm nervous, worried because of that increased exposure. Thomas is someone that I think we all pretty much agree on. I was looking at the consensus rankings. We have him 14th, 15th, and 15th overall. everybody agreeing he's a high round 2 pick.
Yeah. I'm worried we're all overrating him.
If Dave's right in these worries, we're all too high on him.
Yeah, I'm going to try to quell your fears here a little bit, Dave, because first of all, you mentioned 13.3 PPR fantasy points.
That was what he averaged from week 1 through week 11.
Right. And then he goes on this tear at the end of the year where Christian Kirk was out for the year at that point. Evan Ingram missed a lot of that stretch. And Brian Thomas ended up averaging 16.5 PPR fantasy points per game, good enough for wide receiver 14 per game as a rookie. And he goes for 1,282 yards and 10 touchdowns on 133 targets. First of all, he already did that on 133 targets, right? So even if he doesn't have the target jump that you're looking for, he could probably get more than 133 or be at around 133. But you're right. I mean, if he's going to be a top 15 pick, we are hoping for 150 or more targets from him. But the argument I will keep on making for Brian Thomas Jr. is that Jacksonville's pass offense was one of the worst in the NFL last year. They were 24th in gross passing yards per game. Only 2 teams threw fewer touchdown passes than the Jaguars. That would be the Giants and the Patriots. Interestingly enough, the Browns, who have Jerry Jeudy, and the Raiders were tied with the Jaguars for the 3rd fewest passing touchdowns in the NFL. So that's 3,717 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. It's Liam Cohn that you're buying into as well here, and you're just hoping that Trevor Lawrence does something. But if they can get up to 4,100 passing yards and 25 touchdowns, it's not really asking that much, in my opinion. I do think it's going to be a total funnel of targets, and I think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to lead the team in targets. I don't think you're too high on him at all. I think you guys all have him as wide receiver 8, and I think you guys are doing fine here with this because the Jaguars passing game is going to make up for the Travis Hunter issue by just being much, much better overall.
Yeah, well, that makes me feel worse that you're signing off on this.
I think it makes up, like Dave said something that I might even put more emphasis on. He said there's a reasonable chance or something that Travis Hunter is a good wide receiver.
Yeah, good is too light of a word.
There's a
chance he's the number 1 receiver in Jacksonville. There.
I was trying to put a percentage on it, and I think it's higher than 25% chance that Travis Hunter is just the best wide receiver on Jacksonville and one of the best wide receivers in the NFL moving forward.
Yeah, but
he's
I think
also the guy that's more likely to get short and intermediate targets compared to BTJ. Not
Brian
that
Thomas
BTJ
Jr. was
can't
so
do
good
great.
last year. He was whatever. Yeah, what you just said about Travis Hunter being one of the best receivers. I mean, I think Brian Thomas Jr. has a better chance of being one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. That's how good he was last year. One of the best yards per route run rates that we've ever seen from a rookie.
Yeah. It is not unreasonable to suggest that this could eventually be one of the 3 best wide receiver duos in the league.
I think, Adam, like we obviously all agree that Brian Thomas Jr. has a better chance of, that's why we have him ranked so much higher. But that most wide receivers in that range don't have, like Chase has Higgins, but we have a 0% concern that Higgins is going to be better than Chase.
Yeah.
Jefferson out of Adams, same thing, 0%. Lamb and Pickens, same thing, 0%. Maybe Puka has a little bit of that concern more than the other guys, but Thomas probably has the biggest risk in terms of just the unknown of how good Travis Hunter could be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the optimistic case, it reminds me of my fears 2 seasons ago, I want to say, about A.J. Brown. When Davante Smith ended that season, the first time the Eagles went on their Super Bowl run, Davante Smith, second half of the year, I think he out-targeted A.J. Brown, or it was almost even. So I was a little worried about A.J. Brown that year. But what's happened in the 2 years since? A.J. Brown gets, I mean, we know Davante Smith's a great player, but A.J. Brown just gets so many more targets than him and is stud. By the way, if you're looking at the consensus rankings on YouTube, and you heard me say that everybody, that Dave, Jamie, and Heath all have Brian Thomas Jr. as wide receiver 8. How is he actually wide receiver 9 in the consensus rankings? It's just because A.J. Brown is 5th for Heath. So consensus can be a little bit different than just looking at the individual rankings. All right, let's move on here. So Jerry Jeudy for Heath, that's one player he's worried about being wrong about. Dave is worried that he's too high on Brian Thomas Jr.
Right.
I wanted to talk about Jaylen Waddle with the John. Now that we've had a night to kind of digest the Jaylen Waddle or the Jonnu Smith trade going to Pittsburgh, and Waddle was not even a top 50 wide receiver last year per game. He was 56th. He was 49th overall. He played 15 games, scored 2 touchdowns. But if we just look at the first 3 years of his career, 2021, he's wide receiver 14 per game in PPR, 23 per game in non-PPR. This was a weird season. It was before Tyreek Hill. He got 142 targets, and he just 104 catches, not a lot of big plays, lower ADOT. That was not really the Jaylen Waddle we expected. 2022, he's the number 8 wide receiver overall. He's 10th per game in non-PPR, 14th per game in full PPR. 2023 was kind of a weird year. He had a few games that he played about half the snaps. He just wasn't on the field nearly as much, but his yards per route run rate was amazing. It was 7th in the NFL. It was higher than it was in his standout 2021 season, or 2022 season. So Jaylen Waddle was 22nd per game in PPR, 20th per game in non-PPR. So his first 3 years, 14th per game in PPR, 14th per game in PPR, 22nd per game in PPR, and in non-PPR, 23rd, 10th, and 20th per game. So just by that logic, and you're seeing the rankings right now, Jaylen Waddle's 37th. I don't know if that's updated or not since yesterday, but just by that logic, isn't it pretty easy to make the case that Jaylen Waddle should be a top 24 wide receiver on draft day?
I thought on Twitter yesterday, Jared Smola had a really good little chart that he put out that showed the percentage of the Dolphins targets that went to each position the last 3 years. And for the purposes of this conversation, the relevant number is in 2022, 66.5% of the Dolphins targets went to wide receivers. In 2023, it was 67.8%. Those are both higher than average, very good, not outlandish, not as outlandish as last year when it was 50%.
Yikes.
And I think figuring out with Jonnu Smith gone where that percentage goes to determines where Waddle ends up in rankings. If it's 65%, then yes, he's a surefire top 24 wide receiver. I am just kind of like with Rashee Rice, but I'm just kind of in a holding pattern with Waddle right now because I want to see who the Dolphins bring in to play tight end. I don't believe their starting tight end is currently on their roster.
I agree with that. I also remembered that in 2023 he had 0 games with 15 or more PPR points when both Tyreek and Achane were on the field. That number did increase in 2024 to 3 games where he had 15 plus sharing with Tyreek and Achane. He has 9 games in his past 37 overall with 15 or more PPR points. This is an example of when things go wrong for a super talented wide receiver. Okay. When we talk about Waddle's talent, he's fast. He's a good route runner. He's shifty. He's got good hands. He can make plays after the catch. Like we all knew this. We've all seen this. And now it's like, well, now he's in a split role. He's not getting the type of volume that we want. His quarterback isn't as efficient as we want him to be. This happens sometimes. This happens to people's careers. This is Waddle's life. And we're just fantasy managers, but we can't look at him and say, okay, now this is going to be the year when the 2 guys that meant the most to impacting his numbers over the last 2 seasons are still on this team and still theoretically in very large roles. And they're probably going to add another tight end that could take more targets away.
I think the interesting question right now, and I think we'd all answer it differently probably, but what's the hierarchy of tight ends they could potentially acquire that would either keep Waddle where he is or move Waddle up? Like, I think we've heard whispers about Kyle Pitts being potentially available.
Mm-hmm.
Cole Kmet, somebody who could potentially be the Raiders apparently don't want to trade Michael Mayer. The Seahawks just drafted a tight end. Maybe they want to move Noah Fant's money.
Right.
Like guys, like which of those guys would matter to Jaylen Waddle? And it's a difficult question to answer because Jonnu Smith wasn't ever anything like what Jonnu Smith was before last year.
Jonnu Smith is an example of a guy who we might have viewed as not being a super talented player who did get an opportunity.
I think Fant's pretty comparable.
Right. But that's the thing. Like, it could be any time. Gerald Everett is a free agent, Heath. But if he goes to Miami and the Dolphins decide we're going to use Gerald Everett just like we used Jonnu Smith, he's going to be
I think it's going to be a bad time for the Dolphins. I think that's going to be a bad. Like, I would probably move Waddle up at least 6 spots if Gerald Everett's their plan.
Well, why? Their plan should be.
Wrap it up.
Their plan should be give Jaylen Waddle the ball more.
Yeah, I agree.
Why haven't they done that? That's a question that, you've got to think about. They literally decided in the middle of last year, let's throw the ball 4 yards or closer to the line of scrimmage to Jonnu Smith 100 times when they've got Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle on the team.
Right. They just traded Jonnu Smith, so that could be an indication that they are ready to funnel targets back to 3 players now, Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Jaylen Waddle. But we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on the developments. As of right now, if we were drafting today, you're still not considering Waddle a top 30 wide receiver.
Correct.
No. And it might be a mistake, but no. Round 6.
All right, I got to get a commercial break in here. When we come back, I want to tell you about our draft-a-thon, some news and notes, and players we're worried about being wrong about after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Okay, it is July. It is draft-a-thon month. For basically the next 2 months, really, it's draft-a-thon season. We're going to be raising money for St. Jude. So St. Jude, they treat pediatric cancer patients, but not only that, with the money you give to St. Jude doesn't just go to that. It goes to the families who basically, they don't want the families to have to worry about anything other than their child. So they don't have to worry about room and board and all that. So you donate to St. Jude, you're helping not just the child, you're helping the entire family here. This is an amazing charity. And I think this is our 8th draft-a-thon. And for the last 2 years, we've reached 6 figures in terms of donations. So first of all, one of the biggest drivers here is the FFT Open. The FFT Open is like the Scott Fish Bowl. Basically, last year we had 12 different leagues. The first year is going to be year 3 of the FFT Open. The first year we had 8 leagues. Last year we expanded to 12. And there was an Adam League, a Heath League, a Dave League, a Jamie League, a Schneier League, a Schaefer League, and 6 others from the CBS family. And it's $250 a spot. We open 11 spots up in each league. Yeah, look, it's a little bit of money, but all of it goes to St. Jude. So let me get my calculator out real quick. We fill up a league, and this is actually easy math, $2,750 for every league that we fill up. Now, you have to win your individual 12-team league, and then you advance to a 2-round playoff, and then we have an FFT Open champion. So we've been lucky enough to go from 8 leagues to 12 leagues. This year, there are going to be 24 leagues, 24 FFT Open leagues. If we fill every spot at $250 each, we're raising $66,000 for St. Jude. And that will absolutely put us on a path to $100,000. Now, these leagues are going live on July 22nd, I believe. I will get the exact date. You still got some time. But a few weeks from now, those are going to be live. So I'll tell you all about that. I'm going to bug you with that for a few weeks. But for right now, what you can bid on is a mailbag question. Here we go. If you're looking, it's easy to see here on youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. The URL you want to go to, though, is tinyurl.com/2025FFT. tinyurl.com/2025FFT. Donate $50. Ask us a question. It will be read on a mailbag episode. And we'll be releasing more throughout the month. I think the next 2 months. tinyurl.com/2025FFT. Now, I know that was a pretty long explanation about Draft-a-thon. I won't do that on every show. But there you go. That's the intro to it. If you want to ask us a question, if you want to get your question answered on our mailbag podcast, you can buy that right now for $50. It all goes to St. Jude. tinyurl.com/2025FFT. All right. Some news and notes for you. Teams are discussing whether or not they should trade or can trade for TJ Watt, one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. He's unhappy with his contract with Pittsburgh. They're trying to work it out. Meanwhile, Tom Pelissero says the Steelers have no intention of trading for TJ Watt. And the first report about teams discussing the possibility was from Adam Schefter. Vincent Bonsignor of the Las Vegas Review-Journal says, as Heath mentioned, I think just a couple minutes ago, the Raiders have no interest in trading Michael Mayer. And Washington and Terry McLaurin, they have not made any progress on contract negotiations. That's according to Adam Schefter. So we will move on to players we are worried about being wrong about. And Heath has a list of 5 players he's worried he's too high on. One of them is Jerry Jeudy. The other 4 are Saquon Barkley, Ashton Jeanty, T. Higgins, and Davante Adams. Barkley, Jeanty, Higgins, and Adams, you're worried you're too high on them. And you have, as we look at your top 200 rankings, you have Barkley 3rd. Jamie and Dave have him 6th. You have Jeanty 5th. Jamie and Dave have him around 12th. You have Higgins 19th. Jamie and Dave are around 24th. And you have Adams 37th. And you're the low guy on him, and you're too high. All right, how about these 2 running backs in the top 5, Barkley and Jeanty?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Barkley one's pretty easy, right? The reason Dave and Jamie don't have Saquon Barkley number 1 or number 2 overall is because he had 5 million touches last year. And most running backs who get 5 million touches in a season, the following year, they either get hurt or they aren't as good. And I probably would have Barkley number 1 overall if it wasn't for that. And I'm not sure that at 3 or 4, I've lowered it enough. That risk is real. At the same time, a lot of times when guys show the ability to handle that type of work, they are guys who have the ability to handle that type of work. And this is a fantastic situation. And Barkley could score 15 to 20 touchdowns, and it shouldn't really surprise anybody.
Look, I don't think Dave's going to fight you too much because he's got him 6th. But I know, Dave, you made the point before that Barkley has had that kind of, or close to that kind of work before, and he followed it up with an injured season, right?
It wasn't 5 million touches, but it was 350 or more touches. And each of the first 2 times he had at least 350 touches, his fantasy production did fall the second year or the year after on a per game basis. But I talked about this last week too. I don't think Heath was around to hear it. I'll be brief. There have been 25 running backs, including Saquon, over the last 35 years to have at least 400 carries in a season. Of those previous 24, because we don't know how Saquon's going to do, 17 of them fell short and either got hurt or saw at least a 25% drop in their PPR point per game average the following year after the 400 touch season. So if you look at Saquon's number from last year per game, what was he, around 22, 23? You lop off 25% of that. Yeah, that's still a pretty good number for fantasy, but it's not top 5 good. So I'm not taking him as a top 5 pick. There are a lot of people that will. I'm going to let them do it, and I will let them take the chance on Saquon Barkley, who has struggled to have a monster year after having a monster year, to do that in his age 28 season.
And I'll just say that Dave's giving me flashbacks right now, and they're not the good kind. Like I spent the entire summer citing historical evidence of older running backs who change teams and aren't as good as they've been in the past. And Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry made that look completely foolish. I think like that information is all right. And that information is why I'm worried I'm too high on Barkley, but also Barkley and Henry just destroyed historical precedent last year. And they are the types of backs with the talent to do that.
Honestly,
the history that you're talking about, though, is just changing teams. It's not something related to their actual physical activity, especially in the case of Saquon, who's shown us twice before in his career on fewer touches. He had 482 touches last year. On 350 touches, he took a step back the following year. Now he's got 482. I think listen, I'm worried I'm too high on him, and I'm either tied for being the low guy or I'm the low guy on him. Yeah,
you and Jamie both have him 6th. Last year, it wasn't just Barkley and Henry. It was Jones and Connor. Like every running back kind of overachieved based on historical trends. And, it's those concerns, and this is a different discussion, but those concerns should still be there for a guy like James Conner. Right? He's pretty old. He's what, 30 now?
He's
right?
30. Aaron
Just
Jones
because
is
he
over
did it-
30. Derrick Henry's
Yeah.
over 30.
But at least Jones is going pretty late. Round 7, I think we said yesterday.
Compared to the other guys, yes.
Connor could be a round 5 pick. And just because he was able to do it at 29 doesn't mean you should just ignore the fact that he's 30. But okay. Jeanty as your number 5 overall player. And I'm guessing that's your RB. Oh, that's your RB4. So you have 4 running backs in your top 5. Bijan, Chase, Barkley, Achane, Jeanty.
I don't think this is drafting Jeanty at his ceiling. I think Jeanty's ceiling is the best running back in fantasy football for 5 years. He's such a rare combination of a workhorse back who is comfortable handling the ball 20 times a game and a guy who can score from anywhere on the field. I don't believe reports that there's going to be some sort of committee in Las Vegas because I see the names behind him on the depth chart. This was potentially, it has been argued by many people, a historically good running back class. And there was really very, very little, just maybe a couple of Amari and Hampton fans, but pretty much a strong consensus that the best running back in one of the best draft classes we've seen in a while was Ashton Jeanty. There's a reason he was drafted so high. I think Chip Kelly makes this offensive environment better. Geno Smith makes this offensive environment better. And I'm worried I'm too high because he's a rookie and he hasn't done it in the NFL yet. But every way we have of evaluating running backs coming into the NFL tells us this is a superstar. And I don't know that you can draft him too high.
How about we take a little trip down memory lane? Let's look at the last 10 years of running backs drafted pretty early in the first round. Let's say the first half of the first round. Todd Gurley back in 2015. He was RB4 per game in non-PPR, RB9 per game in full PPR, but he was coming off an ACL tear. Missed the first 2. Isn't that amazing? Missed the first 2 games, had 7 touches in week 3. And from weeks 4 through 16, he was on pace. He was just a monster. But he was only on pace for 28 catches, so they barely had him in the passing game. So RB9 per game in full PPR for Gurley, RB4 per game in non-PPR. Ezekiel Elliott, number 3 running back per game, 2016. Leonard Fournette, number 5 per game in non-PPR, number 8 per game in full PPR. Christian McCaffrey had a disappointing rookie season. He was one of the few early first-round picks that didn't have more than 18 touches per game. Barkley, number 2 per game in full PPR, number 4 per game in non-PPR. That's basically it until we get to Bijan, who was a bust because of the whole, what's
the combination of Arthur Smith and the migraine.
Yeah, but also
one game.
I was going to say Tyler Algier.
But it had a huge impact on his per game numbers.
And Jahmyr Gibbs was number 8 per game. So there haven't been that many that have been top 5 per game. It's Zeke, it's Barkley, and then in non-PPR, it was Gurley and Fournette, which is pretty good, actually. That's like half the guys or more.
About a 50-50 shot.
But in full PPR, it's only 2 guys. It's only Barkley and Zeke. I, however, take away from this, like, the opportunity is there. I mean, most of these guys are getting a ton of work. 19 or more touches per game. Zeke had 23.6 touches per game. Barkley, 22 touches per game. That's if I told everyone that Ashton Jeanty was going to get 22 touches per game, I think they'd consider him a top 5 pick, right?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Speaking for everyone. And then I think we talked a lot about T. Higgins. Are you worried about that you're too high on him because of the injury history?
100%.
Okay. So let's talk about Adams then.
Yeah, he's a 32-year-old wide receiver who I know I'm the low guy on him in terms of overall. I think amongst I'm just a little lower on some of the wide receivers in that range than Dave and Jamie are, because overall wide receiver I am 16 or 17. But he's a 32-year-old wide receiver. He has a very old quarterback, and he has Puka Nacua on the team also. I think the evidence that we have is Davante Adams, wherever he goes, he earns a bunch of targets. I mean, that's going to be true until it's not. And for a lot of elite wide receivers, 32 has been the age where it's not been true anymore.
Yeah. I wish he had gone somewhere else so I could just quit Davante Adams. But this
Right.
Rams
Why couldn't you go to the Patriots?
No, I don't know that I would have quit him if he had gone to the Patriots. But
Why couldn't he have gone to the Titans?
Yeah, there we go. Then like 5th round pick, but I get the appeal. He still gets open. His open score was really good last year on the advanced metrics. And Cooper Kupp, I say it over and over again. Cooper Kupp, he faded. His last 3 games are horrible. He had, I think, 9 or 10 targets. Before that, he was basically elite. So, yeah, Dave, what do you think about Adams? You're higher on him than Heath is. Are you worried that you're too high on Adams?
No. Part of the problem is that I don't have another receiver that I would take ahead of him. Here in my rankings, here are the receivers I've got just behind him. Rashee Rice, JSN, Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson. You can make the case for any or all 4 of those guys to go ahead of Davante Adams, and you could start that case with the Grandma Gilmore argument that he's too old. Look at him. He's too old. But when you actually look at Davante Adams, he does not look too old. You mentioned the open score from ESPN for Davante Adams. You see it on film. So there's no real evidence that he's slowing down. And now he's going to an offense that is notorious for scheming their wide receivers wide ass open on a week-to-week basis. And defenses are probably going to have the opinion of, well, maybe we should slow down Puka Nacua first since he's the younger guy instead of double teaming Davante Adams. Or they're just going to play a ton of zone and it's going to be easy underneath throws. We know Davante Adams can win on those as well. We're going to talk about another Rams player that I'm getting a little nervous about. And if he doesn't come through, then it's going to mean more passing for LA. And it's going to end up being a boon for Davante Adams, who I think is going to be their best red zone weapon. I talked about this as soon as he signed with LA. He is perfect to fit into the Cooper Kupp role if they so choose to put him in that role. He is a borderline wide receiver 1 for me. I don't like him as much as Sportsline. Did you see that, Adam? Sportsline has him at 8, but I still think he can be very good, and I'm looking forward to drafting him in round 3.
Taking him ahead of Tyreek Hill is an insult to me. I'm insulted.
In your face.
He was so much better last year.
I just don't care. Right.
I think you've made it very clear that you just do not care about anything negative about Tyreek Hill.
It's pretty much, I mean, other than the off-field stuff, I care about that. But in terms of
you of all people care less about the off-field stuff.
No. In terms of fantasy production, no. I'm attributing it to the injury. And the one guy last year, by the way, I said, I don't care. I am completely writing off his really bad 2023 season. You know remember who it was?
Deshaun Watson?
It was kind of. It was T. Higgins. It was T. Higgins, who I thought had a lot of excuses for a horrible 2023 season. But no, like obviously I'm a little worried that I'm too high on Tyreek Hill because as of now I plan on drafting him a lot and he's 31. But I
did move Tyreek with the Jonnu news ahead of Davante. So that is a move that I made. I'm still lower than you on him, but
I would expect that. All right, so that's Heath's list. Oh wait, there was more to Heath's list. Oh man, we're definitely not going to get to everyone. We'll take a break and talk about players Heath is worried he's too low on after this. All right, Heath, you have Derrick Henry 21st overall, whereas Jamie has him 16th and Dave has him 14th. So I guess, Barkley wasn't really that much better than Derrick Henry. Barkley was RB1 per game. Henry was RB3 per game. Why are you so much higher on Barkley than you are Henry? You say you're a little worried that you're too low on Henry at 21 overall.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm a little worried I'm too low on him is because of last year. The reason that I have like the difference between RB1 and RB3 or 4, depending on which site you're looking at for Henry in full PPR, is like it was still also a 2 full points per game. Like I've got stretches at wide receiver where 17 guys might be separated by 1 point per game in the projection. So 2 points per game is significant. 3 years of age is significant. I think it's just more. You have to decide whether you're more worried about Barkley's touches last year or Henry's age 31 season.
All right. Let's go through the rest of your list so we can get to Dave's list here.
Yes.
Players you're worried you're too low on. Garrett Wilson, go.
Yeah, if the connection with Justin Fields is as good as it was in college and Fields takes even one more kind of small step forward, I don't know if people realize his passer rating has gone up every year of his career. His interception rate's gone down in every year of his career. His sack rate's gone down each of the last 3 years. If he continues getting better and has that connection with Wilson, Wilson could finally have the season that justifies the way we've all been feeling about him. I'm still just a little nervous about it.
Dave and Jamie have Wilson as basically a 3-4 turn pick, right around 35th overall, and you've got him 47th, so a round later on Garrett Wilson. Xavier Worthy, you have at 71, and he's top 50 overall. This is not wide receiver rank. It's 71 overall for Heath on Xavier Worthy, whereas 45th for Dave, 49th for Jamie.
I'm worried that Rashee Rice will not be 100%, and I'm too low on Xavier Worthy. But I do think if Rashee Rice is 100%, there's not going to be enough targets to support Xavier Worthy as a top 24 wide receiver.
Dave, do you agree with that sentiment? Is you have Worthy in your top 50 overall. You have him as a 4th round pick. If Rashee Rice is 100%, are you going to be too high on Worthy?
No, I'm worried that it's just going to be inconsistent volume for not only Worthy and Rice, but for Kelsey too. The thing that I really like about Worthy is his speed. It's a differentiator between him and Rice, and obviously him and Kelsey. And that's something that the Chiefs can find ways to utilize. They did find ways to utilize it from, the last, let's call it like 6 weeks of the regular season and into the playoffs. And it wasn't just Worthy running 45 yards downfield. It was screen passes. It was slants. It was reverses. They're going to find ways to use his speed, and that might help him stay involved in the offense on a consistent basis, but not necessarily a high number of touches and targets from week to week. Those numbers will fluctuate, but the usage of how he's used and the opportunities that come out of it because he's so explosive could lead to some good efficiency. I think he will justify being a top 50 pick.
I should have said it is possible that Dave's right and Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy are both top 20 wide receivers and Travis Kelce's a top 10 tight end. And then we're just all too low on Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about this scenario? This is maybe where I'm leading. Rice is really good. Worthy's really good. And Kelce is waiver wire fodder. Or he's like a low end. Probably not going to end up on the waiver wire, but he's, 10th per game or something like that. Not really making an impact.
It's possible.
So I think it probably depends on how Kelce is 10th per game, because he's either going to need to continue to get a lot of targets like he did last year and not score touchdowns, or he steals touchdowns from Worthy and Rice and sees a drop off in targets. But I don't think both of those things are going to make room for Worthy and Rice, and Mahomes is just QB6.
Do you think I'm making too big of a
get
deal?
4 for 40 with a touchdown each week? That's how Kelce will get it done.
Do you think I'm making too big of a deal out of 12 targets in the first? Let me just get a target share. 13% target share in the first 3 games of the season before Rashee Rice's injury. That was Travis Kelce.
I almost wonder if a lot of that had to do with how the Ravens defended Rashee Rice in week 1. And I wonder if a lot of that has to do with the Chiefs trying to acclimate Rashee Rice and kind of establish, okay, everybody in the league, watch out. This is what we're going to use him for. I think those 2 factors might have been why Rashee Rice had such a high target volume before he got hurt.
And I know like Worthy was a rookie, so we kind of give him a pass on it. But Worthy didn't have more than 4 targets in a game until week 5. And he had a 4-week stretch in the middle of the season where he was averaging 4 targets per game. Like he basically just had, it wasn't even that great of a strike. He had a huge Super Bowl.
Like the last 6 games.
Total. Right. But even in those last 6 games, like in the playoffs, he had a 45-yard game against the Texans.
Yeah. And Kelce was good in that game, as I recall.
He had a 46-yard game in week 15 against the Browns, 41 in week 14 against the Chargers. Like, I like Holly. I'm worried I'm too low on Worthy. I get it, but it just if Rice and Kelce are both healthy, I don't think there's enough targets. I think he's one of those guys that Dave complains about because he scores 18 points 1 week, and then he has 2 weeks with single digits, and then he scores 18 again. And you don't know when you're getting which.
Xavier Worthy. So if the case for Worthy is the last 6 games he played, including the postseason, but not including week 18. I don't think I think if he played in Week 18, it was
wasn't
one
much,
snap.
right.
One snap.
okay. So the last 6 games he played, including the postseason, but not Week 18, Xavier Worthy scored 19.6 or more PPR fantasy points in 5 of 6 games. He had 11, 11, 9, 6, 7, and 8 targets. But also he had 4 games with, well, he had 1 game with -8 rushing yards. But he had, let's see, he had 3, he had 9 carries, right? So there's a little bit of rushing there too with Xavier Worthy. That helps. 9 carries in 6 games.
And a lot of that's weighted by the Super Bowl.
240 yards per game, passing yards per game, right? And that's kind of like the same Jacksonville argument I made is let's just get more passing production from the Chiefs and everyone can profit from it. And then you're worried you're too low on Mark Andrews and Bhayshul Tuten. Mark Andrews is your tight end 10, which is more or less in line with Dave and Jamie. Dave's actually the low guy on Andrews at tight end 12 in PPR.
Yeah, I still like Mark Andrews over the last 5 years has been one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Last year, he completely disappeared from the Ravens' order of priority in terms of targets, but still scored a bunch of touchdowns. From a projections point, I can't even get Andrews into the top 12. I'm just ranking him higher than he projects. But there's a chance that the Ravens just decide this guy's really good and we're going to give him the ball more. It's just hard. It's harder for me to believe that at his age and with Likely there and with Flowers emerging and with the fact that Lamar and Derrick Henry might run the ball 30 times a game.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think what makes it tough is that he's still so good.
Right. I think there's tight ends who are I don't think are as good as Mark Andrews that I have ranked ahead of him right now because of concerns about Andrews' targets. And that's uncomfortable. You'd rather just draft the better players.
All right, give me a quick thought on Bhayshul Tuten, rookie running back for the Jaguars.
I don't understand the Bhayshul Tuten thing at all. And he's currently in CBS ADP, the first Jacksonville running back being drafted. I think he might be in best ball also. Travis Etienne's a good pass catching back. Tank Bigsby was legitimately, by several metrics, one of the best rushers last year. And Bhayshul Tuten's a day 3 running back. I don't think the argument for me that Cohen inherited these other 2 guys and then made a priority to go draft Tuten on day 3 is anywhere close to enough justification to draft him as high as they are. But maybe everybody else is right and I'm wrong.
All right. Oh boy, we have a really good question. Man, I want to get to this. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
This is actually from Tim Stafford, who's in our Bake Burger Dynasty League.
Oh, good.
Tim is a very knowledgeable guy, right? He says, whenever Saquon's discussed, it appropriately gets pointed out that he had a very heavy workload last season. And relatedly, that historical data pretty clearly indicates a high chance of a meaningful dip in production or worse, an injury. However, almost never do we hear the same thing about Ashton Jeanty. In 14 games last season, Jeanty had 374 carries and 23 receptions. That's nearly 400 touches. Why aren't we equally worried about Ashton Jeanty's prior season?
That's part of the reason why I don't have him as high as Heath has him. And I think that's part of the reason why the Raiders might say, all right, Raheem Mostert, get in there for a series. They're going to want to try and make sure that wear and tear doesn't slow him down either. Same thing with Derrick Henry. Henry had almost 400 touches last year. There is a difference between the type of contact that's made in the Mountain West Conference and the National Football League, though. So I think Jeanty's body will be a little more ready for the rough and tumble NFL game than others would be because of that.
Okay. All right, moving on to Dave. Oh, yeah.
No, it's okay.
Okay, Dave, players you're worried about being wrong about. You're worried you're too high on Brian Thomas Jr. We heard that. How about a couple of running backs that could be second-round picks? ADP has them maybe in the 3rd round, or at least one of them. Chase Brown and Kyren Williams. Although, honestly, Fantasy Pros, the ADP is so low on Kyren Williams. It's kind of weird. He is going...
Everybody hates Kyren Williams.
35th overall.
Yeah.
Chase Brown is going 28th overall there. But Chase Brown and Kyren Williams, Dave, what are you concerned about being wrong about here?
With Chase Brown, I'm worried that he's going to have too many difficult matchups. And we can laugh at Zach Moss and Samaje Perine being on the depth chart behind Chase Brown, but those guys are going to end up getting minimum roles, smaller roles, but they're still going to cut into Chase Brown. And one of the nice things about Brown last year was he played like 80% of the snaps, like from week 6 on, like breakout running back, all that stuff. Played a ton of snaps. I think it was because he had to. And now the Bengals might not have to use him as much. And if we love Jamar Chase and we love T. Higgins and we love Joe Burrow, I'm wondering if they're going to end up throwing a ton again. And that could end up hurting Chase Brown. Maybe the touchdown regression monster bites him. And it's all factors that make me a little bit nervous about having him ranked too high. No question he's a top 15 type of fantasy running back. But I've been thinking a little bit about his schedule versus Bucky Irving's schedule, his workload versus Bucky Irving's workload. Bucky Irving's workload has nowhere to go but up. Chase Brown's has nowhere to go but down.
I share almost all of Dave's concerns about Chase Brown. I think the easiest way to say it is, if you'd have told us a year ago we were ranking Chase Brown as a top 10 running back for basically any period of time, we would have all thought you were insane. And those types of guys without that pedigree that have those types of years often fall on their face. I don't really have the concerns about the Bengals passing too much because Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase just had career years.
Yeah.
And Chase Brown was awesome during that period of time. So I think that's okay. But I mean, it's just the history of guys who do what Brown did with his little fanfare beforehand.
And as for Kyren Williams, his efficiency metrics were way off in 2024 compared to 2023. He fumbled a bunch. Rams added another running back. Their offensive line has a little bit of a question mark, especially at left tackle. They added Davante Adams to replace Cooper Kupp. I just wonder if Kyren Williams starts coughing up the football early on in the year, are we going to see more of Jarquez Hunter and maybe Blake Corum? Do the Rams go in a different direction? I will feel better about Kyren Williams if the Rams sign Williams to a nice extension before the season starts. That tells me that they really do like him and they really do want him to stick around, and they're not worried about his fumble issue, and they really feel like he is a true stud running back for them. But if they don't do that, then what are they telling us? They're telling us that either Kyren Williams is asking for way too much money or that they don't think he's their future at RB.
I was just going to ask if there was anything other than the fumbles, though.
His efficiency tanked last year.
But have we ever, and maybe there's a really easy example that you guys can think of, but I'm just trying to think of a 25-year-old running back who's had back-to-back seasons over 17 fantasy points per game, whose only competition, Hunter was another day 3 pick, right?
Yeah,
sure. And it's not like he's an amazing talent.
That we get a chance to draft at the end of round 2. Like, it just seems like a gift.
Especially if it's the ADP is real and it's the end of round 3. That's
too far. That's way too far. I don't mind him at the end of round 2. I do mind him at the end of round 1.
Yeah. I don't have him at the end of round 1. I think, like, he did miss a couple of games, but over the last 2 seasons, his 17-game pace is 1,700 yards and 19 touchdowns.
Kyren Williams is going 26th in the OnlyFans ADP, by the way. So, in the CBS ADP. So, yeah, people were low. He's going behind.
Fell flat. Adam's trying to reclaim the joke, and it just fell flat. Everybody in the chat. So why did Adam just steal Heath's joke from yesterday?
I'm so pissed about this because Heath stole Greater Late from me and assigned it to Jamie.
No, that's Jamie had that.
But no, that was mine, and then you just kept giving it to Jamie. And now people are giving Heath credit for this OnlyFans joke that I've been making since last year. And I get this email from a Steve who says, I was listening to the podcast while I was going to sleep, and I woke myself up laughing when Heath said Dave's OnlyFans ADP. And I like, LOL, Steve, that was me. That was my joke. Heath stole it from me, and he thinks it was my delivery, but I don't think so. I think my delivery is fine. Yeah, see, there we go. Dwight's laughing. OnlyFans. Yes. Should be laughing your face off. Okay, you're worried you're too high on Lamar Jackson.
23.7 fantasy points per game in 2023, 22.5 in 2022, 21.6 in 2021. I'm willing to throw out 2021 and 2022 because Todd Monken was not running the offense then in Baltimore. He was in 2023. Maybe you throw that out as well because it was his first year running the offense in Baltimore. And then if we do that, then sure, Lamar Jackson, he had over 30 fantasy points per game last year. Could he do that again? Absolutely. I'm just nervous about him being the number 2 quarterback. Could he finish there? Could he be number 1? He was number 1. Yeah, he could, but he could also be number 8 or number 9. The only real thought I have is
number 8 or 9.
Yeah,
how is he going to be number 8 or 9?
Basis. When he what was
a
he
huge issue? This is where he is a great case for Azer stats. There have been several games in those years where he plays barely any of the game, scores almost no points, and it tanks his points per game.
In those weeks,
it doesn't matter. When he's healthy, he averages over 24 fantasy points per game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues every single year. Lamar Jackson, when he's healthy, is not going to be QB8. What'd you say?
In a game this year.
What'd you say?
I'm just going to ask my commissioner to give him 24 fantasy points.
You're really not understanding the concept of the Azer stats. We're trying to get the most representative sample size of when a guy is healthy, doesn't leave a game after 3 plays. What does he do? I can't control you started a guy and he gets hurt. What I can control is this is what the player does when he's healthy. When the worst Lamar Jackson does is 24 fantasy points per game, basically, every single year. Now, that could be around QB 4 or 5. There's no way Lamar Jackson's going to be QB 8 when he's healthy. No way.
Heath, when do you think Adam's going to realize that I'm messing with him when I make this?
But it's counterproductive because it's just throwing
I think, yeah. Listen, Adam's obviously a little bit sensitive today. Every day, some might say. But I think that the Lamar concern is basically the T. Higgins concern without quite as much evidence.
Sure.
But T. Higgins has had more injury problems. Lamar has had a history of missing games due to injury. He's also, I don't know that there is a quarterback, and somebody can correct me, that has had the volatility that Lamar Jackson has had in the way that he produces touchdowns. And last year, like if we were drafting Lamar in round 1 to score 30 points a game again, there'd be great reason to be nervous because he did that mostly because he had an 8.6% touchdown rate. And over his career, it's gone 3.5, 9, 6.9, 4.2, 5.2, 5.3, 8.6.
Right.
So if you expect a 5% passing touchdown rate, it gets a lot more difficult for Lamar to get to QB1.
Also, if we draft Lamar's second QB off the board and he averages 24 fantasy points per game, we're not going to be happy with that.
I agree with that. But I think the floor is probably more like QB 5 or 6. I don't think he could be a QB 9 or 10. However, Dave, I am looking at my notes and seeing that there were 2 years where he averaged more than 24 fantasy points per game and would have finished as QB 8 or 10. I guess those were strong quarterback years. So I apologize. I do take exception with your points per game, but your QB 8 was kind of spot on. I
don't want him to do that. And if I can get him as the second QB off the board at a price point that I like, I'm taking him. Just worried that I might be a little too high on him.
Man, if there were 8 quarterbacks who averaged 24 fantasy points per game, that must have been a hell of a year for quarterbacks. All right. And then what about JSN? That's an interesting one. And James Cook, they're going in the same range.
James Cook is an easy one because of the touchdown regression. He had 18 touchdowns. It's rare when a Bills running back gets that type of production. And he also didn't play a ton. He's kind of on the same sort of touch diet and snap diet that Bucky Irving was on. And I don't know if the Bills have any reason in the world to up his workload, especially if he misses the start of the season because he's holding out for a new contract. So we've got to wait and see what happens with James Cook. He will become a very easy fade if he doesn't participate in training camp, isn't a part of the Bills preseason process. They do tend to play their starters at least one time in a preseason game. And it will make Ray Davis an interesting late round dart throw. If James Cook doesn't end up being a part of the Bills operation in this month. As for JSN, we know they're going to move him all over the formation, probably going to play outside a little bit more. That's not necessarily a death sentence on his stats. He can still run in breaking routes from there and do fine. I'm concerned about Cooper Kupp taking work away from him because I think Cooper Kupp is going to be okay to start the season. Hopefully he plays more than 10 games. And it's Sam Darnold at quarterback. I think that's a step down from Geno Smith. I wonder if we're all kind of overrating GSN. That's my favorite network. JSN. When it comes to targets and catches, he's kind of somebody I want to fade in non-PPR. And I'm getting a little nervous about him in full PPR.
I think Dave said that the last part really well. Is it
the GSN part?
Yeah.
If Cooper Kupp is the guy he was at the beginning of last year, he is a much better target earner than DK Metcalf ever has been.
Right. And he'll
a much bigger threat. And JSN's been dependent on volume. If Cooper Kupp is earning 8 to 10 targets per game, JSN's a bust.
Yeah, probably. Cooper Kupp, 32 years old. Are you worried, Heath, that you're too high on JSN? Where do you have him?
I think I have him right about this same place, but I agree with Dave that and this is why I have the receivers lower. I think the wide receiver 2 is lower than they do. Is you get past that Drake London, Ladd McConkey group, and maybe you include Tyreek Hill in it as well. And there's a big drop off. And you're just kind of searching for guys to rank 14 through 18 at wide receiver.
Adam, you never know who you might see on GSN.
Yeah. Is that what they say about, is that the slogan?
No, I'm just saying that
you might see somebody on this show.
Sometimes people go on game shows and those game shows are replayed.
Do you ever look for that?
No, never.
Would you turn it off if it came on?
I lived it. I don't have to look for it.
Yeah, Dave was on Wheel of Fortune once upon a time. Well, yeah, that's a great question. Would you watch it if it came on?
No.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, I would. 15th for JSN for both of you, 13th for Jamie. All right, let's go to 2 players you're worried you're too low on. Tyreek Hill.
I'm surprised you're waiting until now to talk about this.
Well, you are definitely too low on Tyreek Hill. I agree. And Cooper Kupp was the other one, so it's a good transition here. Tyreek and Cooper Kupp.
Right. Kupp's easy to talk about now because we just got done with JSN. If Kupp stays healthy, and as of now he is healthy, and they're promising him a lot more slot work, then he's going to be pretty good in PPR. And so all this talk about him going, forget about him. He's old. It's over. It's done. Like, I agree. Like, he's not fast, but he can still cut and get open with his route running. He's got good hands. He'll get a lot of targets inside of 10 yards and maybe score a decent amount of touchdowns, like 6. But if we're drafting him in like 90th overall, that feels like good value. And so I'm wondering if I'm a little too low on Mr. Kupp, and he should be in that prominent wide receiver 3 range.
How much do you think the offense is going to translate? Because you talked about the Rams getting people, quote, wide ass open.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's on the Seahawks.
Kubiak's done that a few times himself, I think.
Yeah, so that's my question. So
it's the same type of offense. Kupp might even be helping Clint Kubiak with scheming guys open because he did it for so long in LA, and it's a version of that Shanahan-McVay type of system.
Okay. So we want to talk about
Tyreek Hill. If Tyreek Hill is healthy and fast and his wrist is okay, and the Dolphins say, you know what, we need to win this year. Let's stop throwing the ball to 250-pound Jonnu Smith and let's give it to Tyreek Hill and let him just scoot all over the field. Man, that'll make him one of the best receivers in fantasy. And everyone except Adam will look foolish for having him ranked as low as they do.
Am I the high guy on Hill now?
Well, that doesn't include me.
Yeah, I remember when Dave very early, and I think year 1 that I was at CBS before I had rankings, asked me where my rankings were. So I've always wanted to use that on you. Where are your rankings, Adam?
Right here. He
didn't have rankings.
Do you remember the first 2 or 3 years? I was primarily a baseball
analyst. I
analyst.
had lunch yesterday.
I was primarily a baseball analyst who came on the football show a couple times a week.
Huh.
Oh, really? Interesting.
That was you?
What year did you start?
2015.
Okay.
My primary first gig was remember Daily Fantasy Live?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was me.
Oh man, things have changed, huh? But you know what? That's just great. The industry's changed a lot, but nothing's changed with fantasy football. It's still super popular and super awesome, incredibly fun. But within fantasy football, things have changed. Dynasty and best ball and all that. But yeah, no, Tyreek Hill, Heath, you are the high guy. You have him 13th.
Yes.
Dave has him 16th, and Jamie has him 15th. And I think on yesterday's bonus podcast, I was talking about the struggle that I would have because I know I wouldn't put him higher than wide receiver 10. Even though I truly believe that we could all be wrong, including me, and he could be wide receiver 1. I absolutely believe he has.
Yep.
He's the last wide receiver, I think, that has the possibility to be the number 1 overall guy. The last drafted. But could I put him ahead of T. Higgins and Drake London at wide receiver 10? Because I'm not going to put him ahead of A.J. Brown in my theoretical rankings, and Brown's wide receiver 9. So, that would be my dilemma, but I don't think he'll ever get. Actually, I take that back. I do think he will get that high for maybe all of you because it won't take much. We already know he's super fast. He made that sprinter back out of the race, right? Like we've seen him running. He's incredibly fast. He should be healthy in terms of the elbow. I don't know what's holding you back at this point because it doesn't make any sense. He was 30 last year. 30 is not old. We can talk about wide receiver age all the time. 30 is not old for guys like Tyreek Hill. They do not have a precipitous drop at age 30 from being the best receiver in football, quite arguably, but very good argument.
I need to push back a little bit.
Hold on. New Adam here. At 29 being the best wide receiver in football to being kind of trash at age 30, that doesn't make any sense. It was the elbow, folks. It was the elbow.
I thought it was the wrist.
It was the wrist.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. They're all connected, Heath. They're all connected. New Adam's not a doctor.
The really important lesson that I hope that everybody takes from that rant there is that age does not affect everybody the same.
Oh, no, he's fine.
Certain people, certain receivers get bad at 29. Some of them get bad at 30. Most of them by 32 hit the wall.
What elite player, though? I can't think of an elite player. I actually think I did this research. An elite player that just dropped off at age 30. We were talking about the best of the best here in Tyreek Hill. I can't think of anyone. I mean, Reggie Wayne. Yes, Reggie Wayne had his best season at age 29. And then he struggled a bit at age 30. He was wide receiver 14 per game. And he bounced back at age 31 at wide receiver 5 per game. Hines Ward. This is just reading straight from my notes. Hines Ward looked like he was in decline at ages 29, 30, and 31. He averaged around 60 yards per game. But at age 32 and 33, he went over 1,000 yards and averaged 65.3 and 69.3 yards per game.
Yeah, and 65 yards per game is not going to convince me that Tyreek Hill didn't lose a step.
Okay, but this is Hines Ward for those Pittsburgh Steelers, not Tyreek Hill for these Miami Dolphins.
Who are these Miami Dolphins?
Well, when Tua's healthy, Tua is routinely among the top 5 in passing yards per game. One year he led the NFL in passing yards per game. In fact, in total passing yards. So I'm going with Dwight here. I'm with New Adam. Tyreek is going to be great this year. That's it. I'm planting my flag. Planting it. I'm a Tyreek Hill guy. He's wide receiver 10. Right.
You know, we've seen this. I'm just looking forward to seeing what NFL player has an awful offseason next year that you hitch your wagon to.
Off-season or full season?
Off field.
Well, I hate that. I hate that. I hate that I'm backing this guy, but trying to win fantasy here. I think he's going to win a lot of people fantasy. All right. Anything you want to add, Dave? No, I said it all.
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right, folks.
Said it all.
I said a lot. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today. Draftathon. Go donate. Let me give you that URL one last time. It is tinyurl.com/2025FFT. We'll see you.